Hello and welcome to the channel. I am here for a discussion video for you guys. Now, when entering a new year and a new decade, we are now in 2020, it makes you think about, some of the things that will be coming within this year and even within the decade. The people we'll meet, or the movies that'll be released, or the games that'll be released, and even some of the albums that will be released by some of our favorite bands. But it also makes you kind of wonder what's really next for music or the style of heavy metal that we got today. Like, what is really next for this genre? Like, is there going to be a, different style or a different subgenre that will be coming in the 2020s? Because it does seem like throughout every decade, at least from the very beginning up to the 2000s, it seems like metal has kind of gathered its own theme. You know, you had new wave in the 70s and you had a lot of thrash in the 80s. I mean, I know the 1980s was very thrash metal oriented. And then, in the 90s you had a lot of groove metal and new metal as well. And that was also part of the grunge movement, which grunge is more rock than metal, I think. I think most people can agree on that. And in the 2000s, came the rise of, metalcore and a lot of other subgenres as well. But yeah. And in the 2010s, I'm honestly not sure. I'm not sure what the real, I guess, theme of metal was in the 2010s, you could say. But it does make you wonder what's really next for this genre. And the gist of the video is, have we heard all there is to the metal genre? Like, everything that we've heard, all the metal that we've heard in our lifetime, is that really it? Like, have we really listened to pretty much every style of metal that's meant to exist? Now, personally, I can definitely see why it feels that way. And it's very likely to be possible, but I don't know. I do believe that eventually there will be different styles of metal to come around, but there's also that question that are the new styles that will be coming around, like, are they even going to be any good, you know? And that's definitely a question that I have personally. Like, I don't doubt that there will be some changes in metal, but I'm also worried about either just familiarity or something that is something that's just not good, like something that just worsens the genre. And especially given this in the state that metal has been in for the last few decades, like metal has been very scream vocal oriented, and for someone like me who's kind of been on that path for a while and then kind of steered away, now that I prefer the older bands that don't scream at all, really. Now, yelling is one thing, but you get the idea. But it is something that I'm fearful of in terms of the different styles of metal that will be making its appearance in the next few years or so. And it just does make you also wonder, like, even if there are going to be new subgenres that exist, like, is it really going to be so different compared to the styles of metal that we already got? And that's the whole thing with that familiarity argument, you could say. For me personally, I would like to see metal go back to its roots. Back to the days of the 1980s and even some of the 1970s era of metal. Now, I know some people might not be on board with that because there's still some people that I know that are still comfortable with the modern style of metal that you get today. Metalcore, melodeath, and all these subgenres that are, very popular in today's time. And it's basically what people prefer. A lot of people just prefer the heavier style of metal, you could say. And like I said before about I guess metal changing maybe for the worse, I think it's going to be that thing where it's like we don't want to check it out because it's a new thing and it sounds totally different that we can barely even consider it metal. And you do got to think about some of the, our elder metalheads as well. Shout out to you guys, because I know that I do have a lot of older guys who watch my videos, which I think is really cool. But I do know that a lot of them do have a hard time getting even into the 2000s bands due to how different they are compared to the older style of metal bands, which is definitely understandable, because I personally do like, well, a lot of metal before I was even born, you could say, because I was born in the 90s, so yeah. So it's definitely something that I can definitely understand. And, it is one of those cases where you really can't decide on what direction you want metal to go in. Should they go in more familiar territory, or they should do something completely different? But at the same time, like I said, if they do something completely different, what if it just comes off as not being a good style? Now, obviously, it's going to be more of a subjective thing. Like, I know there's going to be some people that might like this new style of metal that maybe it has to offer. But like I said, I would really like if metal went back to its roots, like basically ditch the scream vocals, I guess you could say, and take more inspiration from bands like Iron Maiden or even Black Sabbath. Now I understand that that's what power metal is for. That's basically the next step after new wave power metal. But power metal, I can't say that it's exactly like new wave, but I would like to see some kind of like return. Now, I don't mind power metal, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that I can see myself getting heavily into due to its fantasy vibes, and it just sounds too medieval. I guess that's the best way to describe it, and I'm just not a fan of that style of metal. I know a lot of people love that medieval style, but it's personally not for me. But it obviously would have to depend on the band, and I think if they do it right and maybe have the sound relevant or whatever, and maybe if it's impactful, then sure, I can see the appeal for it. But I just don't really see myself getting heavily into it. And you have to think too, given that it feels like we've heard everything that there is to metal. It's something that I've personally been feeling a lot lately, and it's not just with metal either, but it's also even with some rock as well. Like, but when it comes to metal, like, when I check out a new band, it's like, yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty good, but it's not like it's anything I haven't heard before. One band that comes to mind is Lamb of God. Now, I'm not really what you call a big fan of them. I don't mind their music, but I can't say that I'm a big fan of them. I listened to one of their songs one time, and I thought, yeah, this is good, but if I wanted to listen to this style of metal, I'd go listen to Killswitch Engage or As I Lay Dying or something, or even Demon Hunter, It's one of those cases, because those, and it could be just a subgenre thing too, because I think Lamb of God is a metalcore band, so that might have something to do with it, but it can go for many other subgenres as well, even in some progressive metal. Now, there are definitely cases where you can tell the bands apart. That's not where I'm getting at. I'm not saying that like they all sound the same, but it's like one of those cases where you feel like this has been done before and it's also been done better, and it's too familiar. And I think that's the thing. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get into bands that have familiar elements to what you're already into. For me, an example. I want to check out more bands in classic rock, Even though I'm into bands like Led Zeppelin and Rush and even Yes, that doesn't keep me from checking out more classic rock bands, because even though the classic rock bands that I may check out in the near future may have some familiarity, that doesn't mean that it's going to be so familiar that I would just completely dismiss them and just stick to the bands that I'm already into. But don't you ever get that feeling that whenever you check out some bands, it just doesn't really wow you as much? And I think it's an interesting discussion to have, you know? I know not everyone would feel the same way about this. I think there are many people that say, well, I find something new in metal every day, something new in rock every day, even. And maybe if you're only exposed to a few subgenres, I can definitely see that. Like, Dream Theater sounds nothing like Killswitch Engage, for example, because they're both in two separate subgenres, even though they're both metal bands. So maybe it's just for people that aren't really into a whole lot of subgenres, that are just now, I guess, stepping on some different territory when it comes to different subgenres. Because for me personally, I feel like I'm into more subgenres than most metalheads are. Really, the subgenres I just can't get behind are black metal, death metal, deathcore, pretty much anything of that realm, you could say. And I'm even getting into I am getting into new metal though, which is something that I didn't ever think that I could get into. I always had a low tolerance when it came to new metal, a genre that started in the 90s. But it's actually grown up to be one of my favorite subgenres of metal. I like bands like Sevendust, Slipknot, Linkin Park. I've always liked Linkin Park for years though. But yeah, it's an interesting topic, and let me know what you guys think. Do you guys believe that we've heard pretty much all there is to metal, or do you think that there's going to be something new and original coming very soon? I think whatever metal has to offer next, I'd still be very open to it. But I know we're just now getting into 2020, and, we really can't expect anything to change too drastically right now in the world of metal. But it's interesting to see where the future of metal goes. But either way, guys, that's my video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys kind of feel the same way that I do? Feel free to let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and take care.